Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you. I stood outside the church gates while the organ music swelled, welcoming everyone except me. The security guard glanced at the list, then me, his face stone cold. "Your name is not down here," he said. Just then, my phone vibrated against my palm. It was a call that could stop this entire ceremony cold. If I put it on speaker, the wedding would die instantly because they were currently celebrating on property that I owned 100%. My name is Lucy Hughes, and I am 31 years old. That is a fact. It is written on my birth certificate. It is written on my driver's license. It is written on the deed to the house I sleep in and the contracts I sign at work. But apparently, it was not written on the guest list held by the man standing in front of me. He was a large man built like a refrigerator wrapped in a polyester suit that was straining at the seams. He held a clipboard against his chest like a shield. I could hear the music swelling from inside the church. It was a heavy, triumphant organ piece, the kind that vibrates in your chest cavity and tells you that something momentous is happening. It was the sound of a beginning. It was the sound of my brother Evan starting his life over for the second time. And I was on the wrong side of the gate. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the guard said. His voice was flat, practiced. It was the voice of a man who had turned away drunk uncles and crashing ex-girlfriends 1,000 times before. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at a spot somewhere near my left ear. "Your name is not on the list." I stood there, blinking against the harsh afternoon sun. The heat was rising off the pavement, distorting the air. I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my spine beneath the silk of the navy blue dress I had bought specifically for today. It had cost me $400. I had debated the expense for 2 days, wondering if it was too much before deciding that for family, you make the effort, you show up, you look the part. "My name is Lucy Hughes," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling slightly inside my clutch. "I am the groom's sister." The guard finally looked at me. His eyes were tired. He scanned the list again, dragging a thick finger down the page. He flipped to the second page. He checked the addendum. He looked back up. "I have an Evan Hughes listed as the groom," he said. "I have a Brynmuller listed as the maid of honor. I have parents of the groom, but I have no Lucy Hughes." He paused, then added the kicker. "The list is marked final. Ma'am, no additions allowed at the gate. Strict instructions from the family. Strict instructions." The words hung in the humid air between us. This was not a clerical error. This was not a printer malfunction or an oversight by a frantic wedding planner. This was a line drawn in the sand. My phone vibrated against my palm. I looked down. The screen lit up with a notification from 20 minutes ago that I had missed while driving. It was a text message from my sister. "Brain, do not come. You will just make things ugly. Stay home." I stared at the screen. The letters were crisp and black against the white background. There was no emoji, no softening apology, no explanation, just a command delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who is used to being obeyed. "You will make things ugly." I looked up from the phone. A black sedan pulled up to the curb behind me. The valet rushed forward, opening the door. A couple stepped out. I recognized them. They were distant cousins on my mother's side. People I had not seen in 5 years. They looked polished, expensive, and happy. They walked past me toward the gate. The guard smiled at them. He checked their names. He unclipped the velvet rope. "Welcome," he said. "Right this way." The cousin, I think her name was Sarah, glanced at me as she passed. Her eyes widened slightly. It was a look I knew well. It was a cocktail of recognition, confusion, and immediate instinctive pity. She saw me standing outside the gate while the music played inside. She saw the guard blocking my path. She saw the reality of my position in this family laid bare on the concrete. She didn't say hello. She didn't stop to ask what was wrong. She just clutched her husband's arm a little tighter and hurried past, eyes fixed on the church doors, desperate to distance herself from the contamination. I was the contamination. I was the problem. For a moment, I considered making a scene. I considered raising my voice, demanding to see Evan, screaming that I was his sister, that we shared the same blood, the same childhood, the same trauma. I considered pushing past the guard. I imagined the scene inside, the heads turning, the gas, the shattered illusion of their perfect day. But that was exactly what they wanted. If I screamed, I proved them right. If I cried, I was the unstable sister. If I fought, I was the aggressor. Bryn's text message would be vindicated. "See," she would say to the guests, sipping her champagne, "we had to keep her out. She's just too much." I took a deep breath. The air smelled of expensive lees and exhaust fumes. I realized then that the exclusion was not about protecting the wedding. It was about teaching me a lesson. It was a public shaming designed to remind me of my place. My place was outside. My place was nowhere. This was not the first time. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow, dragging me back 4 years. I remembered standing in Bryn's kitchen. The countertops were marble, cold and white, just like her smile. She was arranging flowers in a vase, snapping the stems with efficient, brutal movements. "It's just a small ceremony, Lucy," she had said, not looking at me. "We are keeping the aesthetic very specific." I had been holding a coffee mug, my knuckles white. "Specific?" I had asked. "I'm your sister." Bryn had turned then, wiping her hands on a linen towel. "You know how you get," she said. "You're intense. And visually, honestly, you don't fit the vibe we are going for. We want everything to look cohesive for the magazine photos. You understand, right? You don't want to ruin the photos." She had made it sound like a favor, like she was sparing me the embarrassment of being the ugly duckling in her swan lake. I had swallowed the hurt. Then I had stayed home. I had liked the photos on Instagram. I had played the good sister. Then there was Evan's first wedding. I was invited to that one, but only to the reception, not the ceremony. Limited seating. He had lied. I found out later the church had a capacity of 500 people. There were only 100 guests. And now for his second wedding, the one meant to fix the disaster of his first marriage, the one meant to reestablish him as a serious man in the community. I was erased completely. Evan needed this wedding to be perfect. He needed to look like a winner. And in the narrative my family had constructed over the last decade, I was the loser. I was the unmarried, chaotic, struggling sister. Having me there would remind people of the messy reality they were trying so hard to lacquer over. The guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you need to step aside. You are blocking the entrance for the guests." I looked at him. I looked at the church. The music had stopped. The ceremony was starting. My brother was standing at the altar, likely adjusting his cuffs, smiling that charming, empty smile of his, confident that the Lucy problem had been handled at the perimeter. Something in my chest hardened. It was not a break. It was a setting of concrete. For years, the pain had come from the rejection. It had come from the desperate childlike need to be included, to be validated by the people who shared my DNA. I had spent thousands of dollars on gifts they didn't appreciate. I had spent hours listening to their dramas. I had made myself small so they could feel big. But as I stood there in my $400 dress, sweating in the heat, I realized the most painful thing wasn't that they had kicked me out. The most painful thing was that they had successfully trained me to believe I deserved it. They had conditioned me to accept the scraps, to say thank you for the crumbs, to apologize for existing. I looked at the phone in my hand. Bryn's message was still there. "You will just make things ugly." No, Bryn, I haven't made anything ugly yet, but I am learning. I turned to the guard. He braced himself, expecting an argument. "Have a nice day," I said. He blinked, surprised. "You too, man." I turned on my heel. The gravel crunched under my heels. The sound was loud in the silence outside the church. I walked back toward the parking lot, my head high, my back straight. I did not look at the latecomers hurrying past me. I did not look at the church. I reached my car, a sensible mid-range sedan that my family liked to make fun of because it wasn't German or Italian. I unlocked the door, and the heat from inside the vehicle blasted me in the face. I threw my purse on the passenger seat. As I reached for the door handle to pull it shut, my eyes caught a sign staked into the manicured grass near the parking lot entrance. It was a welcome sign. Elegant script on a frosted acrylic board framed in gold. "Welcome to the wedding of Evan Hughes and Clara Miller. Event Coordination and Venue Management by Prestige Heritage Group." I froze. My hand hovered over the ignition button. Prestige Heritage Group. I knew that name. I didn't just know it. I knew the font. I knew the specific shade of gold they used for their branding. I knew their billing cycle. I knew their standard liability clauses. Prestige Heritage Group was not just a wedding planner. They were a massive property management firm that handled high-end historic venues across the tri-state area. They were the ones you hired when you wanted to access locations that were otherwise off limits. And more importantly, I knew them because I had spent the last 6 months auditing their parent company's risk portfolio. A cold, sharp laugh bubbled up in my throat. It escaped before I could stop it. It sounded strange in the quiet car. Evan and Bryn thought they were gatekeeping me from their world. They thought they were the ones holding the keys, deciding who got in and who stayed out. They thought they were playing a game of social chess, where I was just a pawn to be sacrificed for the sake of the board's aesthetic. But they hadn't checked the board. I started the car. The air conditioning kicked on, blasting cool air against my flushed skin. I looked at the church one last time in the rear view mirror. They wanted me to disappear. Fine, I would disappear. I would become a ghost, but ghosts have a funny way of haunting the houses you stole from them. I shifted the car into reverse. The tires crunched on the gravel, a sound like bones breaking. I didn't drive home. I drove toward my office. It was Saturday. The building would be empty. It would be quiet. It would be perfect. If they wanted to ban me from the party, that was their choice. But they should have checked who owned the building first. I drove away, leaving the sound of the organ behind me, the name Prestige Heritage Group burning in my mind like a fuse that had just been lit. The wedding was just the beginning. The reception was where the real work would happen, and I had a feeling that by the time I was done, no one would be looking at the bride. They would be looking for the exit. I merged onto the highway, the speedometer climbing. 60, 70. I felt lighter than I had in years. The humiliation was still there, sitting in my gut like a stone, but it was changing. It was no longer a weight that held me down. It was ammunition, and I was fully loaded. 30 days is exactly enough time for a bruise to fade from purple to yellow to nothing. But apparently, it is not enough time for my family to forget that I am the designated failure of the lineage. We were seated at a round table in the center of the Ironwood, the kind of steakhouse where the lighting is kept intentionally dim to hide the prices on the menu, and the waiters wear vests that cost more than my first car. The air smelled of dry-aged beef, expensive cologne, and the distinct metallic scent of judgment. It was a Tuesday night, but for the Hughes family, it was a summit. The official reason for the dinner was twofold. First, Bryn had an announcement that she had teased in the family group chat for 3 days with excessive use of sparkle emojis. Second, Evan had secured a new title at his firm, a title that sounded impressive if you did not know that his firm was essentially a shell company for tax loopholing. I sat between my father and the bread basket. It was the strategic position of the invisible child. If I stayed quiet and kept passing the butter, perhaps they would forget I was there. But of course, that was never how these dinners went. I was not just a guest. I was the prop they needed to make their own successes shine brighter. You cannot fully appreciate how high you have climbed unless you have someone at the bottom of the ladder to look down upon. So tell us, Bryn, my mother said, clasping her hands together. She was wearing her pearls, the ones she usually saved for Easter. The suspense is killing me. Bryn beamed. She looked glowing. Truly, she placed a hand on her flat stomach and looked at her husband, Mark, who was busy checking the sports scores on his watch. We are expecting, she announced. The table erupted. My mother gasped as if this were the first pregnancy in the history of human biology. My father clapped Mark on the back hard enough to dislodge a filling. Evan raised his scotch glass in a toast. Number 2, Evan said, building the dynasty. I like it. Congratulations, I said. I smiled. It was a practice smile, tight at the corners, but polite enough to pass a casual inspection. Bryn looked at me. Her eyes lingered for a second, searching for a crack in my expression, looking for the jealousy she was convinced I harbored. When she didn't find it, she looked disappointed. Thank you, Lucy, she said, her voice dripping with that sugary condescension she had perfected in high school. We are just so blessed. Truly, it puts everything into perspective. And that is not all. My father boomed. Evan. Evan adjusted his cufflinks. He leaned back in the leather booth, expanding his chest. He looked like a man who had just purchased the world and was considering returning it because the color was slightly off. Director of Regional Sales. He said it is official as of this morning. Comes with a corner office and a significant bump in the base salary. More applause, more toasts. I took a sip of my iced tea. The ice cubes clinked against the glass, the only sound I was contributing to the symphony of self-congratulation. It was then, inevitably, that the spotlight turned. The silence that followed the celebration of Evan's promotion was heavy. It was the deep breath a predator takes before the pounce. My mother turned her head slowly toward me. Her face arranged itself into a mask of tragic concern. "And how are things with you, Lucy?" she asked. The question was not an inquiry. It was an opening statement. "Fine," I said. "Work is busy." "Busy doing what exactly?" Evan asked. He cut into his steak, the knife slicing through the rare meat with surgical precision. "Are you still at that? What was it, that temp agency?" "It is a financial consulting firm." "Evan," I said, keeping my voice level. "Right, right. Consulting," he chuckled, sharing a look with Bryn. "That is the word people use when they are between real jobs, isn't it? Like how actors are technically waiters who are consulting on scripts." I gripped the stem of my glass. "I am a director of portfolio risk at Northgate Meridian Partners. I manage assets that could buy this entire restaurant chain and turn it into a parking lot without denting the quarterly budget." But I did not say that. I never said that because if I told them the truth, the narrative would shift. They wouldn't be proud. They would be suspicious. They would ask who I slept with to get the job, or they would assume I was lying. And if they believed me, they would ask for money. "It pays the bills," I said simply. My mother sighed. It was a long shuddering sound. "We just worry about you, honey," she said. "You're 31. You seem so living in that apartment, bouncing between these little jobs. We just want to see you secure like your brother and sister." I looked at Bryn, who is currently married to a man who had cheated on her twice, and Evan, whose credit score I had secretly seen while running a background check on a tenant applicant who turned out to be his former business partner. Secure was an interesting word choice. "Actually," Evan said, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin, "that reminds me, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Jerry. He runs that logistics company out on the highway." I waited. I knew what was coming. It was the rescue operation. "He's looking for a front desk girl," Evan said. "You know, someone to answer phones, sign for packages, greet clients. It is simple stuff, 9 to 5. No stress." He looked at me benevolently, like a king tossing a coin to a beggar. "I told him about you," he continued. "I told him you are smart enough, just a little lacking in direction. He said he would be willing to interview you as a favor to me. The pay is $18 an hour. That is a step up for you, right? $18 an hour." I calculated the math in my head. I made more than that in the time it took me to brush my teeth in the morning. But the table was watching me. They were waiting for the gratitude. They wanted to see me humbled. They wanted to see me accept the charity so they could feel benevolent. If I refused, if I told them I didn't need their help, I would be the ungrateful daughter, the difficult one. I took a deep breath. "That is very thoughtful of you, Evan," I said. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just acknowledged the act. "See," my mother beamed, patting my hand. "Family looking out for family. That is what matters. You should call him tomorrow. Lucy, it would be good for you to have some stability. Maybe you could finally save up for a decent car." I nodded, staring at the bread basket. I wondered if I could fit an entire roll in my mouth just to stop myself from speaking with the Lucy problem solved for the evening. Bryn felt safe enough to reclaim the center stage. She tapped her fork against her glass. "Speaking of family," she said, her eyes glittering, "Mark and I have decided on the date for the vow renewal." "Oh," my father asked. "When October 15th, she said that is 3 months away." My mother said that is very soon. Bryn venues are booked years in advance. Bryn smiled, a slow cat-like expression of triumph. "Not this venue," she said. "Well, usually it is. It is impossible to get into, but Evan pulled some strings." Evan nodded gravely. "It took some doing. I had to call in a marker from a guy I know in real estate. But we got it, and we got it at the family rate. I looked up. A cold prickle of intuition danced down my neck. "Where is it?" I asked. Bryn looked at me, annoyed that I had spoken, but too excited to withhold the information. "It is called Mariner's Gate Estate," she said. The world stopped. The noise of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the low murmur of conversation. The jazz music faded into a dull buzz. Mariner's Gate Estate. I knew the name. Of course I knew the name. I knew the tax parcel number. I knew the code to the security gate. I knew that the third step on the main staircase creaked if you stepped on the left side. I knew that the HVAC system in the ballroom had been replaced 2 weeks ago because I had signed the check for $25,000 to pay the contractor. "It is in Harbor Cove," Bryn continued, mistaking my silence for ore. "It is this massive historic property right on the water. Total old money vibes. It has been closed to the public for years, but apparently they just started doing exclusive events." Exclusive events, Evan added. Very high-end. No riffraff. I stared at him. He was lying. He didn't know a guy. He didn't call in a marker. I lowered my hands to my lap so they wouldn't see my fists clench. "It is stunning," Bryn went on. "There is a private dock, a ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, and these gardens that look like they belong in a Jane Austen movie. It is perfect for my branding. I mean, for the ceremony." She pulled out her phone. "Look, I have photos from their website." She shoved the phone across the table toward my mother. I glanced at the screen. It was a photo of the East Wing terrace at sunset. I remember taking that photo. I had stood on that terrace 3 months ago with my contractor discussing whether we should plant hydrangeas or roses along the retaining wall. We had chosen hydrangeas. "It is beautiful," my mother cooed. "Oh, Bryn, this is going to be spectacular. It will be the event of the season," Evan said, "and the best part, we got the contract signed yesterday. Locked in. Contract signed." My mind raced. I had not signed a contract for a Bryn Weller or an Evan Hughes. I approved every booking personally. That was the rule. My management team knew that the owner, me, though they knew me only as the representative of the holding company, had final veto power. If there was a contract, someone had bypassed me. "Who did you deal with?" I asked quietly. Evan looked at me irritated. "The management company, obviously." He said, "Prestige Heritage Group. Why do you think you know them?" He laughed. A sharp barking sound. "Stick to the receptionist gig. Lucy, let the adults handle the real estate." I looked at the steak on my plate. It suddenly looked raw and unappealing. They had booked my house. They were planning to host a celebration of their vanity in the sanctuary I had built to escape them. They were going to parade their friends and their lies through the hallways where I kept my grandmother's journals. And they had done it by lying. There was no other way. If they had used their real names, my system would have flagged it. If they had gone through proper channels, I would have seen the request. Evan said he got a family rate. There was no family rate. There was only the rate I set. I looked at Evan. He was smirking at his reflection in the back of a spoon. He looked so proud of himself. He thought he was a kingmaker. He thought he had conquered the uncomparable venue. He had no idea he was sitting across from the landlord. I picked up my fork. I forced my hand to be steady. I cut a small piece of potato and put it in my mouth. It tasted like nothing. "That sounds lovely, Bryn," I said. "I am sure it will be a day to remember." "Oh, it will be," she said, flipping her hair. "We are going to make sure everyone knows who we are." I chewed slowly. Yes, I thought. We certainly are. They had not just crossed a line. They had trespassed. They had walked right into the trap I hadn't even set yet, and they were busy decorating it with flowers and ego. I took a sip of water to wash down the potato. "So, Evan," I said, my voice calm, almost bored. "This friend of yours, the one who got you the deal, is he close with the owners?" Evan waved a hand dismissively. "Tight," he said. "They go way back." He said the owner is some eccentric old lady who lives in Europe and doesn't pay attention to the bookings. Easy to navigate. I nodded. An eccentric old lady in Europe. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of the restaurant. I saw a 31-year-old woman in a blazer that cost more than Evan's monthly rent. I saw eyes that were tired of crying and ready to start burning. "I am glad it worked out for you," I said. I meant it because now I didn't have to go looking for revenge. They had ordered it from a menu and asked for it to be delivered directly to my doorstep. The dinner continued. They talked about caterers. They talked about the guest list. They talked about how they would have to be careful about who they invited because the venue was so elite. I just listened. I filed away every detail. I memorized the dates. I memorized the lines. When the check came, Evan made a show of reaching for it, then accidentally left his wallet in his other jacket. My father paid. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. The valet brought my car around. It was still the sensible sedan, the one that made me look like a struggling assistant. "Good night, everyone," I called out. "Good night, Lucy," my mother said, distracted, already looking at Bryn's phone. "Don't forget to call that number Evan gave you." "I won't," I said. I got into my car. I waited until I turned the corner out of sight of the restaurant. Before I pulled over, I took out my phone. I dialed the number of my property manager at Mariner's Gate. It was late, but she would answer. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello. Hi, Sarah." I said. "It is Lucy." "Oh, hi, Lucy. Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I said. "I just need you to send me the file for a new booking. October 15th. The name might be under a corporate account or a third party. I heard the typing of keys on the other end. October 15th. Let me see. Here it is. It was just entered yesterday as a priority hold. It is listed under Hughes Weller Renewal." I closed my eyes. "Who authorized the discount?" I asked. "The system shows a 70% reduction." The notes say Sarah hesitated. The notes say family of the owner. It says you called it in personally to the regional director. I gripped the steering wheel. "I see," I said. My voice was ice. "Send me the full packet. Sarah, signatures, email, correspondence, the recording of the call if there is one. Everything." "Is there a problem?" Sarah asked, sounding worried. "Should I cancel it?" I looked out the windshield at the city lights. "No," I said. "Do not cancel it. Do not touch it. Let them think it is confirmed." "Okay," she said slowly. "Anything else?" "Yes," I said. "I want to know exactly which bank account the deposit came from." I hung up. I sat there in the dark. My family thought they were celebrating a victory. They thought they had secured the crown jewel of venues for pennies on the dollar by using my name, or at least the name they thought I didn't have the power to protect. They thought I was the receptionist. They were about to find out I was the CEO. I put the car in drive. The engine hummed, a low, steady growl. Let them have their party. I whispered to the empty car. Let them plan. Let them dream. October 15th wasn't going to be a vow renewal. It was going to be an eviction. The morning after the dinner at the State House, I did not go to the logistics company to interview for the receptionist position my brother had so graciously arranged for me. Instead, I swiped my key card at the security turnstile of the Northgate Meridian Partners building in the financial district. The guard, a man named Henry who had worked there for 10 years, nodded at me. "Good morning, MS. Hughes," he said. "Good morning, Henry," I replied. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The door slid open to reveal a lobby of glass and steel, silent except for the hum of servers and the quiet tread of analysts moving between offices. My office was at the end of the hall. It was a corner suite from my desk. I could see the city sprawl out beneath me, a grid of ambition and concrete that looked deceptively orderly from this height. My family believed I was a drifter. They believed I was a temp worker, a seasonal employee, a woman who needed help filling out tax forms. They believed this because it was the only version of me that made sense to them. If I was weak, they were strong. If I was lost, they were the guides. In reality, I was the director of portfolio risk. I managed a team of 15 senior analysts. I made decisions that determined whether multi-million-dollar mergers proceeded or died on the vine. I had a reputation in the industry for being forensic, unsentimental, and terrifyingly thorough. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, which cost more than the couch in my parents' living room, and woke up my monitors. The glow of the screens was familiar and comforting. Here, in this digital space, there were no emotional manipulations. There were only numbers. Numbers did not lie. Numbers did not gaslight you. Numbers did not invite you to dinner only to serve you humiliation as a main course. I took a sip of black coffee and opened a secure browser window. I was not working on a client portfolio today. Today, I was auditing my own life. I typed in the URL for the internal management system of Mariners's Gate Estate. To the outside world, Mariners's Gate was a historic property in Harbor Cove, South Carolina, managed by a faceless entity called Prestige Heritage Group. To my family, it was a status symbol. They had somehow tricked into giving them a discount. But to me, it was something else entirely. I clicked on the ownership structure tab just to look at it, just to remind myself of what was real. Owner of record LH Coastal Holdings, LLC. Beneficiary Lucy Hughes, shareholder 100%. I leaned back, letting the truth wash over me. It was a secret I had kept for 4 years. The story of how I came to own a multi-million-dollar estate while my family thought I couldn't afford a new tire for my car began with my grandmother, Anna Rhodes. She was my mother's mother, a woman with a sharp tongue and a memory like a steel trap. In her final years, when dementia began to fray the edges of her mind, my family stopped visiting. They said it was too sad. They said they wanted to remember her as she was. Translation: it was inconvenient, and she smelled like old lavender and medicine, and she often forgot who they were, which bruised their egos. I was the only one who went. Every Sunday for 3 years. I sat with her. I brushed her hair. I listened to the same stories about her childhood in Charleston over and over again. I recorded them on my phone because I knew that one day the silence would come and I would want to hear her voice. When she passed, the reading of the will was a spectacle. My mother expected jewelry. Evan expected stocks. Bryn expected the vintage Jaguar. They got those things. My mother bought the diamonds. Evan got a modest portfolio. Bryn got the car. And then the lawyer turned to me. To my granddaughter Lucy, he had read, I leave the right of first refusal for the purchase of the Mariners's Gate property in Harbor Cove at the tax-assessed value of the year 1999. My family had laughed. They actually laughed in the lawyer's office. At the time, Mariner's Gate was a wreck. It was a crumbling mansion on the coast that had been empty for a decade. The roof was leaking. The gardens were a jumble of kudzu. The taxes alone were a nightmare. Poor Lucy. Evan had said in the parking lot afterwards, Nunner left you a money pit. You should just decline the auction. Let the state auction it off. They saw a burden. They saw a ruin. I saw the bones. I saw the Georgian architecture. I saw the deep-water dock. I saw the potential for a wedding venue that could command $50,000 a weekend. So I used every cent of my savings. I took out a high-risk loan that I qualified for only because of my position at Northgate, a position I had already secured but hadn't told them about. I bought the LLC. I bought the house. And for the last 3 years, while my family mocked my haphazard employment history, I had been pouring every spare dollar and every spare hour into that house. I managed the contractors remotely. I flew down on weekends, telling my parents I was going camping or visiting a friend. I selected the marble for the foyer. I chose the hydrangeas for the terrace. I approved the restoration of the ballroom ceiling. I did not tell them because I knew what would happen if they knew I owned it. They would destroy it. Not physically, perhaps, but they would consume it. They would demand to use it. They would criticize my taste. They would take credit for my vision. Now, looking at the screen, I saw they were trying to do exactly that without even knowing I held the keys. I navigated to the Bookings tab. I filtered by date. October 15th. There it was. Booking ID MGOCT 15 RF Client Evan Hughes Binweller Joint Event Type Vow Renewal Garler Status Provisional Hold Deposit Pending Clearance. I clicked on the file to expand the details. My heart hammered against my ribs. A slow, heavy rhythm. I read the internal notes left by the sales manager, a woman named Jessica who had only started 2 months ago and didn't know my family history. Note clients claimed direct familial relationship to the silent. Owner requested the family legacy rate authorized by regional director per standard protocol for owner requests. Clients emphasized that the owner is aware and has waived the standard security deposit. I stared at the words. Clients claim direct familial relationship to the silent owner. They were right. Technically, they were related to the owner, but they didn't know the owner was me. They thought the owner was, as Evan had put it, some eccentric old lady in Europe. This meant one of two things. Either they were lying through their teeth to the management company, inventing a relationship with a stranger to scam a discount, or, and this was the darker possibility, they had somehow found out about the LLC, found out about the property, and were banking on the fact that I was too weak to confront them. I read further down the log. Note, client requested the master suite for the weekend. Client requested the wine cellar be unlocked. Client requested removal of all LH monogrammed linens and replacement with Weller Hughes branding. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost artistic in its arrogance. They were not just renting a venue. They were moving in. They were colonizing my achievement. They were asking to remove my initials LH, Lucy Hughes, from the linens I had personally designed so they could stamp their own names on the fabric of my hard work. I picked up the phone at my desk. I dialed the internal extension for the legal department at Northgate. I needed to verify something before I let my anger take the wheel. "Hey, this is Lucy," I said when the general counsel picked up. "Hey, Lucy, what is up? Need a risk assessment on a merger." I said, "I have a hypothetical question. If someone signs a contract for a venue claiming to have the owner's permission and they don't, is that just a breach of contract or is it fraud?" There was a pause. "If they gained a financial benefit from it, like a discount." "Yes." I said, "a 70% discount. That is theft of services." "Lucy, it is fraud." "Fine. Who is trying to scam you?" "Just a case study I'm looking at." I said, "Thanks." I hung up. I turned back to the screen. I looked at the booking again. There was something else. At the bottom of the screen, there was a section for billing information. Usually, for a booking of this size, the payment would come from a personal checking account or a credit card, but the source of funds listed here was different. Payment source: the Hughes Family Legacy Trust. I froze. The Hughes Family Legacy Trust. I knew that name. I had heard it spoken in hushed, reverent tones my entire life. It was the fund my parents had set up years ago, ostensibly to secure the future for all three of us. It was the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It was where Nunner's cash inheritance had gone, the money I didn't get because I got the burden of the house. I had never seen a statement for that trust. Whenever I asked, my father would pat me on the head and say, "Don't worry your pretty little head about finance, Lucy. Evan is helping us manage it. It is for emergencies. Emergencies like a vow renewal, like a party to stroke Bryn's ego." I felt a coldness spread through my stomach that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. If they were using the trust to pay for this, and if I was a beneficiary of that trust, which I was supposed to be, then they were paying for their party with my money, and they were paying it to a company I owned. It was a snake eating its own tail. But there was a discrepancy. The booking note said the deposit was pending clearance. I clicked on the transaction details. Bank authorization signature on file. Signatory Evan Hughes, trustee. Co-signatory Lucy Hughes. Via power of attorney. The air left the room. I stopped breathing for a full 5 seconds. Co-signatory Lucy Hughes. I had never signed a power of attorney. I had never authorized Evan to touch my share of the trust. I had never given him permission to sign my name on a birthday card, let alone a financial document. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes narrowing. They had used my name to get the discount by claiming to be family of the owner, and they had used my name to unlock the money to pay for the deposit. They had built a castle of lies on a foundation of forgery. I sat back in my chair. The city outside the window looked different now. It didn't look like a grid of order. It looked like a battlefield. My family thought they were playing a social game. They thought this was about who had the best dress, who had the best title, who could sneer the loudest at the dinner table. They didn't realize they had just committed a felony, and they had committed it against the one person in the world who had the receipts, the resources, and the motive to prosecute. I reached for my mouse. I did not cancel the booking. I did not call my brother to scream at him. Instead, I opened a new folder on my secure drive. I named it Mariner's Gate Evidence. I took a screenshot of the booking. I downloaded the chat logs with the sales manager. I exported the billing details showing the fraudulent power of attorney note. Then I picked up my phone and called the venue manager back. "Sarah," I said. "Yes, Lucy. I need you to do something for me," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "I need you to approve the booking." "Approve it?" Sarah sounded confused. "But you said to send you the files because of the red flags." "I know." I said approve it anyway. "Send them the confirmation email. Make it look official. Tell them the owner sends their regards." There was a silence on the line. "Lucy, what are you doing?" Sarah asked. "I'm giving them enough rope," I said. I hung up the phone. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked next to Evan's name. They wanted a wedding, fine. I would give them a wedding. They wanted to be the center of attention. I would make sure every eye was on them. But first, I needed to see just how deep this rot went. If they forged my signature on the trust, what else had they signed my name to? I opened a new tab and typed in the address for the National Credit Bureaus. It was time to pull my own file. It was time to see exactly how much of my life they had stolen while I was busy trying to be a good sister. I hit enter. The page loaded, and the war began. The email from Sarah arrived in my inbox with a high priority flag. The subject line simply reading requested documentation Hughes Weller file. I double-clicked the attachment. It was a single PDF 42 pages long. It contained the entire digital footprint of the lie my brother and sister were currently telling. I did not open it immediately. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the air conditioning on the 42nd floor. Preparing myself in my line of work, I look at risk assessments all day. I look at companies that are bleeding money, executives who are hiding losses, and portfolios that are one bad market day away from collapse. I am used to seeing bad news on a screen, but this was different. This was not a corporate balance sheet. This was an autopsy of my family's respect for me. I opened the file. The first page was the standard venue rental agreement from Mariners' Gate. It was a template I had written myself with my legal team 3 years ago. It was watertight. I scrolled past the standard liability clauses to the signature page. There in blue digital ink was the signature of the primary renter, Evan Hughes. His signature was flamboyant, a large looping scroll that took up twice the space provided. It was the signature of a man who loved signing things. But my eyes were drawn to the line below it, authorized representative of owner. Next to that line, there was another signature, Lucy Hughes. I stared at it. The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. It was my name. It was definitely my name, but it was not my signature. My professional signature, the one I used to sign off on multi-million-dollar risk portfolios, was sharp, angular, and illegible. It was a quick slash of a pen developed over years of efficiency. The signature on the screen was round. The L looped at the top. The Y had a long, curling tail. It was the way I used to sign my name when I was 16 years old. It was the signature I used on birthday cards. It was the signature I used on the permission slips Evan used to bring home for me when our parents were working late. He had not just forged my signature. He had forged the version of me that he remembered. He had forged the signature of the little sister who used to look up to him. I felt a wave of nausea, hot and sudden. I scrolled down to the payment section. Deposit amount, $7,500. Source, Hughes Family Legacy Trust. Check number 4092. I zoomed in on the image of the scanned check included in the file. The Hughes Family Legacy Trust. My parents had set up that trust 10 years ago with the money my grandmother left. Nana Rose had wanted the money to be split 3 ways, accessible to us when we turned 25. But when I turned 25, the meeting had gone differently. Lucy, my father had said, sitting at the head of the dining table, "We are worried about your financial literacy. You are a bit impulsive. We think it is best if the trust remains under a single stewardship for now. Evan has a head for these things. He will manage the portfolio. And if you need anything, really need anything, you just ask him." I had argued. I had cried. But in the end, I had signed the papers they put in front of me because I trusted them. I believed that maybe they were right. Maybe I was bad with money. Maybe I did need a keeper. And now, 6 years later, the keeper was using the money meant for my future to pay for a party I wasn't allowed to attend. I picked up my office phone. My hands were cold. I dialed the number for David Thorne. He was the external counsel for LH Coastal Holdings, the LLC, that owned the venue. He was expensive. He was aggressive, and he was the only person outside of the bank who knew I owned the estate. "David," I said when he answered, "I need you to look at a document I just sent to your secure server. Give me 2 minutes." "Lucy," he said. I heard the click of his mouse. I waited. I watched the second hand on my wall clock sweep past the 12. "Okay," David said. "I am looking at it. Rental agreement. Mariner's Gate. What am I looking for?" "Look at page 18. I said, "the owner authorization signature." I heard him scrolling. "Okay, Lucy Hughes. That is you." "No," I said, "that is not me. I did not sign that." David went silent. The silence of a lawyer shifting gears from casual to combat. "Are you telling me this is a forgery?" he asked. "I am telling you that is an imitation of my signature from high school." I said, "I am telling you that I never saw this contract until 10 minutes ago. And I am telling you that the person who signed as the renter is the one who forged it." "Who is Evan Hughes?" David asked. "My brother," I said. David let out a low whistle. "Okay, Lucy, listen to me. This changes things. This isn't just a contract dispute anymore. This is uttering a forged instrument. It is fraud. And since the deposit check came from a trust, are you a beneficiary of that trust?" "Supposedly," I said. "Then it is embezzlement," he said, "or at least misappropriation of funds. If he is the trustee and he is using trust money to pay a company he thinks is unrelated to you, but he is forging your name to get a discount. God, the layers on this are incredible. He is stealing from you to pay you, but trying not to pay you the full amount." "I know," I said. "It is almost impressive." "Lucy," David said, his voice dropping an octave, "I need to ask you a question, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer." "Okay. If your brother is comfortable forging your signature on a venue contract, and if he has control over your family trust, has he ever had access to your personal identification documents, your social security number, your birth certificate?" I stared at the phone. "Yes," I said. "He helped me do my taxes 3 years in a row when I was just starting out. He said he had a better software program than I did." David sighed. It was a heavy sound. "Lucy, you need to hang up with me right now. You need to go to the credit bureaus. You need to pull your full credit report, not the free summary, the full forensic report." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The dread was already pulling in my stomach. "Because," David said, "people who forge signatures don't usually stop at one document. They stop when they run out of paper." I hung up. My office suddenly felt very small. The walls of glass that usually made me feel powerful now felt like the walls of a fishbowl. I turned back to my computer. I typed in the address for the National Credit Reporting Agency. I had done this hundreds of times for clients. I knew the interface by heart. I entered my social security number. I entered my date of birth. I entered my current address. The system asked me security questions to verify my identity. "Which of the following addresses have you lived at in the past 5 years?" I scanned the list. 1210 Maple Street. No. 550 Park Avenue. No. 42 Oak Creek Drive. I stopped. 42 Oak Creek Drive. That was Evan's house. I had never lived at Evan's house. I had stayed there for a weekend once when my apartment was being painted. But I had never lived there. I had never used it as a mailing address. I clicked none of the above. The system paused. It was thinking. Then it let me through. The report loaded on the screen. At the top was my credit score. It was 720. That was good. But it should have been 800. I had no debt. I paid my credit cards in full every month. I had a mortgage on the estate, but that was under the LLC, not my personal name. I scrolled down to the section labeled Open Accounts. Chase Sapphire Reserve. Mine. Nordstrom card. Mine. Citibank personal loan. I stopped scrolling. Citibank personal loan status open. Current original balance $25,000. Open 2 years and 4 months ago. I stared at the numbers. They didn't make sense. I hadn't taken out a loan 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I had just been promoted. I was making six figures. Why would I need a $25,000 personal loan? I clicked on the account details. Borrower Lucy Hughes. Co-signatory none. Mailing address for statements 42 Oak Creek Drive. The room went silent. There it was. The address I had just flagged as incorrect in the security questions. Evan's address. He had opened a loan in my name. He had used my social security number, the one I gave him to help with my taxes, and he had taken out $25,000. I looked at the date 2 years and 4 months ago. I closed my eyes, searching my memory. What was happening 2 years ago? That was when Evan had started his consulting business, the one that failed after 6 months. He had told the family he had secured an angel investor. He had bought a new watch. He had taken Bryn and Mark to Cabo for a weekend to celebrate his seed round. I was the angel investor. I was the seed round. And he had been paying the minimum monthly payments for 2 years to keep it off the radar, sending the statements to his own house so I would never see them. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. Heartbreak is hot and tearing. This was cold. It was the feeling of something dying. The brother I thought I had, the arrogant, annoying, but ultimately harmless brother, died in that moment. In his place sat a criminal, a man who looked at his sister not as a sibling but as a resource, a line of credit to be tapped, a signature to be forged. I clicked further into the report. I wanted to see everything. There were 3 hard inquiries on my credit in the last 18 months, all of them from leasing companies for luxury cars. All of them denied, likely because the debt-to-income ratio on the application didn't match. He had been shopping for a car with my identity. I sat back in my chair. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I was surprised by that. I expected to be shaking. I expected to be crying, but I wasn't crying. I was calculating. They had banned me from the wedding because I didn't fit the image. They had mocked my job because they needed to believe I was a failure so they wouldn't feel guilty about stealing from me. They had lectured me about financial responsibility while spending my money. It was a master class in manipulation. I picked up the phone and called David back. "You were right." I said. "How bad?" David asked. $25,000. I said, "A personal loan. And the statements go to his house." "Okay," David said. His voice was grim. "Lucy, this is a felony. This is identity theft. We can go to the police right now. We can have him arrested before dinner." I looked out the window. I imagined the police cars pulling up to Evan's house. I imagined the handcuffs. I imagined the scandal. It would be satisfying. It would be immediate. But it wouldn't be enough. If I arrested him now, he would play the victim. He would tell our parents it was a misunderstanding, a mistake, that he was managing it for me. My mother would cry. My father would pressure me to drop charges for the family. They would paint me as the vindictive sister who sent her brother to jail over a paperwork error. No, I said, not the police. Not yet. Then what do you want to do? David asked. I want to freeze it. I said, I want you to draft a notice of fraud and dispute. I want you to have it ready to file with the bank and the credit bureau, but don't file it yet, Lucy. And for the venue, I continued, I want you to prepare a breach of contract notice based on the forged signature, but don't send it. What is the play here? Lucy, David asked. You are holding a loaded gun. I'm not going to shoot him. David, I said, I am going to let him walk into the line of fire. I looked at the calendar on my desk. Tomorrow night was the monthly family dinner, the one they had graciously invited me to, likely to pressure me about the receptionist job again. I checked the time. It was 3:00 in the afternoon. I need you to get the bank on the phone. I said, the bank that holds the fraudulent loan. I can do that. David said, I want to schedule a fraud verification call. I said, I want them to call me to verify the activity on the account. Okay, David said, when do you want them to call? I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. Tomorrow night, I said, at 7:30. That is dinner time, David noted. Exactly, I said. I hung up. I looked at the credit report one last time. Borrower Lucy Hughes. They had stolen my name. They had stolen my credit. They had stolen my inheritance. They thought Lucy Hughes was a ghost they could summon when they needed money and banish when they wanted glory. But they had forgotten one thing about ghosts. They are terrifying when they finally decide to speak. I saved the files. I shut down my computer. I picked up my purse. I was going to go home. I was going to take a long bath. I was going to sleep for 8 hours. And tomorrow I was going to go to dinner. And I wasn't going to bring a salad. I was going to bring the truth. The glow of the computer monitor was the only light in my apartment. It was 3:00 in the morning. I had not slept since leaving the office. I was no longer running on caffeine. I was running on a cold crystalline rage that made my mind sharper than it had ever been. I had the full forensic credit report open on one screen and my email archives on the other. I was cross-referencing IP addresses. To the average person, an IP address is just a string of numbers. To a risk analyst, it is a fingerprint. It places a person at a specific location at a specific time. I looked at the inquiry log for the fraudulent Citibank loan. Date February 12th, 2 years ago. Time 8:45 in the evening. IP address 74.192. I typed that string into my command prompt. Location, residential broadband. Service address 42 Oak Creek Drive, Evans House. I checked the recovery email address listed on the loan application. It was Evan. Business Gmail com. He hadn't even bothered to create a burner account. He was so arrogant, so certain that I would never look that he used his primary business email to steal my identity. He treated my credit history like it was an extension of his own wallet. Just another resource he was entitled to harvest because he was the golden child, and I was the surplus. The memories hit me then, not as nostalgia, but as evidence. I remembered that February. I remembered sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a pile of tax forms. Evan had come over with a six-pack of beer in his laptop. "Let me handle this, Luce," he had said, patting my shoulder. "You know how you get with numbers. You get overwhelmed. You'll probably forget to file a deduction and get audited. I have the pro software. I will just take care of it for you." I had been grateful. I had actually thanked him. I had handed him my Social Security card, my driver's license, and my W-2 forms. I had made him dinner while he sat in my living room typing away, stealing my future while I cooked him pasta. He had told me he was filing an extension for me. He wasn't. He was filling out a loan application. I looked at the amount again, $25,000. Why did he need $25,000? 2 years ago, I'd opened a new tab and began searching through the state's business registry. I looked up Evan's consulting firm, the one he bragged about constantly before he suddenly pivoted to his current corporate job, Apex Strategy Group, LLC. Status dissolved. Dissolution date March 1st, 2 years ago. The dates lined up perfectly. He had taken the loan in my name in mid-February. He had dissolved his failing company. 2 weeks later, the picture became clear. His business was failing. He was drowning in debt. He needed a way to pay off creditors or perhaps buy his way into his new role without admitting failure to our parents. He couldn't ask them for money because that would shatter the illusion of his success. So he took it from me. He used my credit to pay off his mistakes, then dissolved his company and announced his promotion to the family. He had built his reputation on the ruins of my financial profile, and he wasn't the only one using me to patch up a leaking life. I turned my attention to Bryn. Why the sudden obsession with a vow renewal? Why now? Why spend tens of thousands of dollars on a second wedding when her first marriage was barely holding together? I went to the social media archives. I didn't look at her Instagram, which was a curated feed of lies. I looked at the local society pages, the digital gossip columns of our town's upper crust. I searched for Bryn's name. I found it in an article from 6 months ago. It was a piece about the Junior League's annual charity gala. Notable absences. The column read, Ben Weller, usually a staple of the committee, was asked to step down following a discrepancy in the silent auction funds. While no charges were filed, Mrs. Dweller has been noticeably absent from the social circuit this season. I sat back. So that was it. She had been exiled. She had been caught with her hand in the cookie jar, or at least accused of it, and the wealthy friends she coveted had cut her off. The vow renewal wasn't a celebration of love. It was a desperate PR campaign. She needed a venue so exclusive, an event so lavish that the core four of the local elite would be forced to pay attention to her again. She was trying to buy her way back into society, and she was using my house and my money to do it. My siblings were not just mean, they were parasites. They were drowning, and instead of learning to swim, they were standing on my head to keep their mouths above water. I picked up my phone. It was 4 in the morning. I didn't care. I sent a text to David. My lawyer, do not file the notice yet. I have more evidence. We wait. Then I started printing. I printed the IP logs. I printed the loan application. I printed the dissolved business records. I printed the society column. I organized them into binders. Binder 1, the loan. Binder 2, the venue. Binder 3, the motive. I was building a case that would put a prosecutor to shame. The sun began to rise over the city, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it was red, trying to wash away the feeling of violation. At 9:00, I was at my desk at Northgate. I called the operations team at Mariner's Gate. Jessica, it is Lucy. Hi, MS. Yes. We sent the confirmation email as you asked. The clients were thrilled. Good. I said, now listen to me very carefully. This booking is a sting operation. There was a pause. Excuse me. I said it is a sting operation. You are to proceed as normal. Answer their calls. Note their requests, but do not sign any vendor contracts that require a non-refundable deposit from our end. And under no circumstances are you to mention my name. If they ask about the owner, you repeat the line about the elderly woman in Europe. Do you understand? Yes, M. Yes. But is this legal? I am the owner, Jessica. I said I can deny service to anyone I want, whenever I want. I am choosing to deny it at the last possible second. Just do your job. I hung up. Then I called Citibank. I navigated through the automated system until I reached the fraud department. I gave them my social security number. I need to speak to a supervisor. I said when the supervisor came on the line, I didn't scream. I spoke with the flat, dangerous calm of a woman holding a detonator. My name is Lucy Hughes. I have identified a fraudulent loan in my name, account ending in 4,599. I see. The supervisor said, we can start a dispute claim. We will need to send you an affidavit. I have already filled out the affidavit. I said, I have the IP logs. I have the proof of residence for the address on file. I have everything, but I don't want you to close the account yet. I don't understand. The supervisor said, I want to schedule a verification call. I said, we can do that now. He said, no. I said, I am not available now. I need you to call me at a specific time. I need you to call my cell phone to verify the activity. When tomorrow night I said at 7:30 in the evening, ma'am, we usually just please. I interrupted. This involves family identity theft. I need the call to happen when the perpetrator is present. It is the only way to get them to admit it on the record. If you call, I will put it on speaker. You will ask to verify the address. That is all I need. There was a long silence. This was highly irregular. But I knew banks. They hated fraud more than they hated irregularity. If I handed them a confession, they would take it. Okay, the supervisor said. Finally, I will make a note for the shift manager. We will call you at 7:30 tomorrow to verify the account details. Thank you. I said. I hung up. The trap was set. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Don't be late for dinner tomorrow, and please dress nicely. Evan says he might have good news about that receptionist job. I stared at the screen. The receptionist job, the $1.18 an hour bone they were throwing to the dog to keep it from barking. While they carved up the steaks I paid for, I didn't reply. I went back to work. I spent the rest of the day analyzing risk for a pharmaceutical merger, but a part of my brain was already at the dinner table. I imagined the scene, the low light of the dining room, the clinking of silverware, the smug looks on their faces. They thought they had broken me. They thought that by banning me from the wedding, They had silenced me. They thought that by ignoring my career, they had erased my power. They didn't understand that they had done the opposite. By pushing me into the shadows, they had taught me how to hunt in the dark. I left the office at 6. I walked past the high-end boutiques on Fifth Avenue. I stopped in front of a window display. There was a dress. It wasn't navy blue. It wasn't sensible. It was a sharp structural black sheath that looked like armor. It was the kind of dress a CEO wears to a hostile takeover. I went inside. I bought it. I didn't look at the price tag. I went home and laid the dress out on my bed. Next to it, I placed the binder labeled Binder 1 Alone. I wasn't going to dinner to be a daughter. I wasn't going to be a sister. I wasn't even going to be Lucy, the scapegoat. I was going as the director of portfolio risk, and I was about to liquidate a toxic asset. The hours ticked by, night fell, I slept soundly. It is amazing how well you can sleep when you know that tomorrow the world is finally going to make sense. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation. I watched the clock 5:00, 6:00. At 6:30, I dressed. The black dress fit like a second skin. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I applied lipstick that was a shade darker than my usual neutral tone. I picked up my purse. I checked that my phone was fully charged. I walked out the door. The drive to my parents' house was 20 minutes. I drove in silence. No radio, no music, just the hum of the engine and the beating of my heart. I pulled it to the driveway. Evan's car was already there. Bryn's SUV was parked next to it. I looked at the house. It was the house I grew up in. The house where I learned to be quiet. The house where I learned that love was conditional and truth was optional. I turned off the ignition. I checked the time. 7:15. 15 minutes until the call. I took a deep breath. I grabbed my purse. I grabbed the binder, holding it against my chest like a shield. I walked up the front path. I didn't knock. I had a key. I unlocked the door and stepped into the foyer. Laughter drifted from the dining room. It was warm, familiar laughter. The sound of people who felt safe. The sound of people who thought they had gotten away with it. I walked down the hall. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. A sharp rhythmic sound. Click, click, click. I stopped in the doorway of the dining room. They were all there. My father at the head, my mother to his right, Evan and Bryn on the left. They looked up. Lucy, my mother said, surprised, "You're here early and look at you. You look different." I didn't smile. I didn't say hello. I walked to the empty chair at the end of the table, the foot of the table, the place for the least important person. I sat down. I placed the binder on the table. I placed my phone on top of it. Screen on. 7:18. Hello, family. I said my voice was different. It wasn't the voice of the sister who apologized. It was the voice of the woman who owned the building. "So, Evan," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "tell me more about this receptionist job. I want to hear all about how generous you are." Evan blinked. He looked uneasy. He sensed the shift in barometric pressure, but he didn't know a storm was already overhead. "Well," he stammered, "it is a good opportunity. Luce, Jerry is a good guy, right?" I said, "A good guy, just like you." I looked at Bryn and the wedding. I said, "The venue Mariners' Gate. It is fully booked." Bryn narrowed her eyes. "Yes, it is perfect. Why are you going to beg to come again?" "No," I said. "I am not begging for anything." I looked at the phone. 7:29. 1 minute. "I am just here to make sure everyone gets what they deserve," I said. The room went quiet. They looked at me like I was a stranger. And then my phone rang. The screen lit up. Unknown caller. I didn't pick it up immediately. I let it ring once, twice. The sound was loud in the silent room. "Aren't you going to get that?" my father asked. "It is rude to let it ring at the table." "I am going to get it," I said. I tapped the green button. I tapped the speaker icon. "This is Lucy Hughes," I said. A professional voice filled the room, amplified by the silence. "Good evening, MS. This is the Fraud Prevention Department at Citibank. We are calling to verify activity on a personal loan account ending in 4,599. I saw Evan's face go pale. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was instant, like someone had pulled a plug. We have flagged the account for potential identity theft. The voice continued. We are showing that the primary mailing address for this loan is listed as 42 Oak Creek Drive. Can you confirm if this is your current residence? I looked at Evan. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I looked at my mother. She looked confused. 42 Oak Creek Drive. I repeated clearly. That is not my address, but it sounds familiar. Evan, isn't that where you live? The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I waited. The execution had begun. The voice from the speakerphone hung in the air like toxic smoke. 42 Oak Creek Drive. My mother stopped chewing. Her fork remained suspended halfway to her mouth, a piece of roast beef impaled on the tines. She looked at the phone, then at me, and finally slowly at Evan. Evan was no longer the confident executive who had just been bragging about his corner office. He was a statue. His face had drained of color, leaving his skin a sickly waxing shade of gray. He stared at the device on the table as if it were a bomb that had just started ticking. I leaned forward, clasping my hands under my chin. I kept my face open, confused, playing the part of the naive sister they had constructed for me. I don't understand, I said into the phone, my voice pitched slightly higher than my normal register. That is my brother's address. Why would my personal loan statements be going to my brother's house? The representative on the line tapped her keyboard. The sound was amplified by the speaker, a sharp clack, clack, clack that sounded like gunfire in the silent dining room. Well, MS. Hughes, the agent said, her tone professional and clinically detached. The account was opened with that address listed as the primary residence. The borrower indicated that this was a multi-generational home. I looked at Evan. Evan, I asked, did you know about this? Evan swallowed. I saw the muscles in his throat work. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet, strangling sound. It is probably just a clerical error. Luce, he said. His voice was thin, reed-eye. You know how banks are. They probably mixed up our files because we share a last name. It happens all the time. I looked back at the phone. Excuse me, I said to the agent. My brother thinks this might be a clerical mix-up. Can you verify the digital signature on the loan application? One moment, the agent said. The silence returned. My father put down his wine glass. The liquid trembled, sending small red ripples against the crystal. Okay, I have the document here. The agent said the signature is dated February 12th, 2 years ago. It matches the signature provided on the income verification affidavit. However, what I asked, it has been flagged by our system because it does not match the signature on your current driver's license, which we pulled from the DMV database for this review. The loop on the L is significantly different, and the slant is inconsistent. I looked at my mother. Her eyes were wide, darting between Evan and the phone. The agent continued, delivering the final blow. Additionally, the IP address used to sign the document electronically traces back to the same residential address, 42 Oak Creek Drive. There was no way to spin that. There was no clerical error that could explain why a digital signature was created inside Evan's house, using an imitation of my handwriting. I reached out and tapped the red button. The call ended. I picked up the silence and wrapped it around the table. So I said softly. I looked at Evan. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. You stole my identity. I said it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same lack of emotion one might use to say it is raining outside. Evan slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. I didn't steal anything, he shouted. He was panicking now, his eyes wild. I was managing it. You were a mess back then. Lucy, you were between jobs. You had no credit history. I opened that line of credit to build your score up. I was helping you. Helping me? I asked. By spending $25,000, I invested it. He lied. I invested it in opportunities for the family. You used it to pay off the debts of Apex Strategy Group before you dissolved it. I said, I have the dissolution paperwork in my bag. I have the dates. They match perfectly. Evan froze. The realization that I had done my homework hit him. He looked at our parents, desperate for an ally. Mom, Dad, he pleaded. She is twisting this. I was handling her finances because you guys always said she couldn't handle money. I was trying to protect her. My father looked at Evan for the first time in my life. I saw him look at his son, not with pride, but with confusion. Evan, my father said, his voice gruff, did you sign her name? It was a technicality. Evan sputtered. Did you sign her name? My father repeated louder this time. Evan slumped back in his chair. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. My mother let out a small sob. She pressed a napkin to her mouth. Oh, Evan, she whispered. How could you? But then, true to form, she turned her eyes to me. The tearful, victimized gaze shifted. Lucy, she said, why did you have to do this here at dinner? We could have discussed this privately. You didn't have to embarrass your brother like this. I almost laughed. Even now, with the felony laid out on the linen tablecloth, the crime wasn't the theft. The crime was my timing. I didn't embarrass him. Mom, I said, the truth embarrassed him. This is ridiculous. Bryn snapped. I turned my head to look at my sister. She was sitting with her arms crossed over her chest, looking more annoyed than shocked. She was angry that the spotlight had shifted away from her. We are here to celebrate my pregnancy and Evan's promotion, she said, glaring at me. And you are making this all about some stupid loan. It is $25,000. Lucy, it is not $1 million. Evan can pay it back. Can we please move on? You are ruining the vibe. I stared at her. The narcissism was breathtaking. It was a monolith of self-absorption. The vibe, I repeated. Yes. Bryn said, we have important things to discuss. The vow renewal is in 3 months. I have vendors to coordinate. I have guests flying in. She looked at Evan. Evan, pull it together. She hissed, we need to talk about the venue deposit. You said you handled it. Evan rubbed his face with his hands. Yeah, I handled it. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. I will pay you back, Lucy. He muttered, just drop it. Okay, I will write you a check next week. I didn't say anything. I just watched them. They were already trying to sweep the shards of glass under the rug. They wanted to go back to the menu. They wanted to talk about flowers and music and ignore the fact that the man sitting next to them was a criminal. Bryn took my silence for submission. She straightened her posture and flipped her hair. Good, she said. Now about Mariner's Gate. She looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. She thought she was winning. She thought she could pivot back to her victory lap. I know you're jealous, Lucy, she said. I know you wanted to come, and honestly, it is sad that you can't be part of it. The estate is on another level. You have probably never seen anything like it. I took a sip of water. Is that so? I asked. Yes, Bryn said, it is exclusive. We had to use serious connections to even get a tour. The owner is this incredibly private, wealthy woman who lives in Europe. She almost never approves events. Evan had to charm the management company for weeks. Evan nodded, trying to regain some shred of dignity. Yeah, it was a lot of back and forth. They are very particular about who they let in. I looked at the binder on the table. I tapped my finger against the cover. You know, I said, my voice conversational. I have always wondered about that place, Mariner's Gate. It used to be a ruin, didn't it? It was, Bryn said dismissively. But someone bought it a few years ago and poured millions into it. It is pure luxury now. The marble in the foyer alone probably costs more than your entire apartment building. I smiled. Carrara marble, I said. Imported from Italy. It took 6 weeks to ship. Bryn blinked. How do you know that? And the ballroom ceiling, I continued. It is a restoration of the original 1920 plaster work. We had to bring in a specialist from Savannah to match the molding. The table went quiet again. This was a different kind of silence. This wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of confusion. We, my father, asked, why are you saying we? I looked at Bryn and the hydrangeas on the terrace. I said, you like those in the photo, didn't you? I chose them because they bloom late in the season. I thought they would look better than roses against the gray stone. Lucy, what are you talking about? Bryn asked. Her voice had lost its edge. She sounded uncertain. I stood up. I picked up the binder. I opened it to the section labeled Property Deeds. I am talking about the owner. I said. Evan scoffed, though it was weak. The owner is in Europe. Lucy, You are talking nonsense. No, Evan, I said. The owner is not in your. The owner is right here. I pulled out a document. It was the Articles of Incorporation for LH Coastal Holdings, LLC. I slid it across the table. It stopped right in front of my father. He looked down at it. He adjusted his glasses. LH Coastal Holdings. He read, sole member Lucy Hughes. He looked up. His mouth fell open. What my mother whispered. I looked at Bryn. Her face was a mask of disbelief. I bought the estate 4 years ago. I said, I bought it with the money I saved and the loans I qualified for on my own merit. I renovated it. I hired the management team. I designed the branding. I leaned over the table, bracing my hands on the wood. I am Prestige Heritage Group's biggest client. I am the landlord. Bryn shook her head. No, that is impossible. You are a temp. You are a receptionist. You can't afford a place like that. I am the director of portfolio risk at Northgate Meridian Partners. I said my base salary is $350,000 a year, not including bonuses. I don't talk about it because every time I try, you people talk over me to discuss Evan's latest failure or your social climbing. I looked at Evan. He looked like he was going to be sick. And that discount you got? I asked. The family legacy rate. Evan flinched. I approved that. I said, or rather, I told my staff to let it slide when you called and lied about knowing the owner. I wanted to see how far you would go. I pulled out another document, the booking confirmation. You booked my house, I said. You used my trust fund, which you forged my signature to access to pay the deposit on a property that I own. I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. You are literally paying me with my own money to host a party where I am banned from attending. The room was spinning. I could see it in their eyes. Their entire worldview was collapsing. The hierarchy they had enforced for decades. Evan, the prince, Bryn, the princess, Lucy, the pauper, had just been inverted. My mother reached out a hand toward me. Her fingers were trembling. Lucy, she said, you own Mariner's Gate. Yes, mother. But why didn't you tell us? Because I knew what you would do. I said, I knew you would treat it like you treat everything else I have. You would claim it. You would consume it. And luck, I was right. You didn't even know it was mine. And you still managed to steal from me to get inside. I turned to Bryn. You want to know about the vibe? I asked. Bryn didn't answer. She looked small. The vibe is fraud. I said, the vibe is theft. I looked at Evan. I haven't gone to the police yet. I said. Evan's head snapped up. Hope flickered in his eyes. Yet, I repeated. I closed the binder. I picked up my purse. Where are you going? My father asked. He sounded old. He sounded defeated. I am going home, I said, to my apartment, which I own. By the way, I walked toward the door. I stopped at the archway and looked back at them. The food on the table was getting cold. The wine was untouched. They looked like a painting of a family that had been left out in the rain. Oh, and Bryn, I said. She looked at me. There were tears in her eyes now. Real tears about the wedding, I said. She waited. The date is still open on my calendar. I said, but the price just went up. I walked out of the house. I walked down the path to my car. I got in and locked the doors. I didn't drive away immediately. I sat there for a moment watching the house. I saw the silhouette of my father standing at the window, looking out. I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was a text from Evan. Please don't call the cops. We can fix this. I didn't reply. I put the car in reverse. I had dropped the bomb. The dust was just starting to settle, and for the first time in 31 years, I wasn't the one choking on the debris. I drove toward the city lights, leaving the dark suburban street behind. The dinner was over. Now the negotiation would begin, and I held all the leverage. The sun had barely risen over the skyline when the pounding on my apartment door began. It was not the polite knock of a neighbor or the rhythmic rap of a delivery driver. It was the frantic, entitled hammering of people who believed the world owed them an immediate audience. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. My mother, father, Evan, and Bryn were standing in my hallway. They looked like a delegation sent to negotiate a surrender. Though it was unclear yet whose surrender they were expecting, My mother's eyes were swollen. Evan looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Bryn was wearing sunglasses indoors, clutching a latte like a weapon. I opened the door. I was wearing a silk robe that I had bought in Paris, another secret trip they knew nothing about, and holding a mug of black coffee. "Good morning," I said. My mother didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed past me into the living room, her perfume heavy and cloying in the morning air. The rest of them filed in behind her. They stopped in the center of the room, looking around. They were seeing my apartment for the first time through a new lens. For years, they had assumed I lived in a shoebox, barely scraping by. Now they were noticing the high ceilings, the original artwork on the walls, the custom cabinetry. They were looking at the physical manifestation of the lie they had told themselves about me, and the reality was jarring them. My mother turned to me. Her face crumpled. It wasn't anger. It was a weaponized sorrow she had perfected over 3 decades. "Why did you hide this?" she wailed. Her voice cracked perfectly on the last word. "How could you be so deceitful, Lucy? We are your family. We have been worrying ourselves sick about you, thinking you were struggling, and all this time you were mocking us." She sank onto my sofa, burying her face in her hands. It was a master stroke of emotional manipulation. In under 10 seconds, she had taken the fact that I was a successful property owner and my brother was a felon, and she had twisted it so that I was the one who had caused the pain. I stayed standing. I didn't offer her a tissue. I didn't hide it. "Mom," I said calmly, "I just didn't broadcast it. There is a difference. And considering how you treated me when you thought I was poor, I think I made the right call." "You lied by omission," she cried, looking up with tear-filled eyes. "You let us think you needed help. I let you think what you wanted to think." I corrected. "It made you feel better to believe I was a failure. It made Evan feel like the golden child. I just didn't interrupt the performance." My father was standing by the window, looking out at the view. He had been silent since they arrived. He turned slowly since when he asked. His voice was heavy, stripped of its usual bluster. "Since Nana Rose died," I said. I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled down a leather-bound folder. I tossed it onto the coffee table. "Nana left me the right of first refusal," I said. "You all laughed at the reading of the will. You thought she left me a money pit. You told me to let the state take it, but the clause gave me the right to buy it at the 1999 valuation." I looked at Evan. It was $150,000. "Evan, that was the price. The land alone is worth $4 million today. If you had paid attention to Nunner instead of checking your stocks during her visits, you might have known that." Evan flinched. "I took out a loan." I continued. "I worked 80-hour weeks at Northgate. I poured every bonus, every commission, every drop of sweat into that estate for 3 years. I restored it. I marketed it. I built it." My father looked at the floor. He seemed to be doing mental math, calculating the missed opportunity. Bryn, who had been pacing near the kitchen, suddenly took off her sunglasses. The shock on her face had been replaced by a sharp, calculating gleam. She looked at the apartment, then at me, and a smile began to form. It was a terrifying transformation. "Well," she said, her voice bright and brittle, "this is actually good." I looked at her. "Good?" "Yes." She clapped her hands together. "Don't you see? This solves everything." She walked over to me, stepping into my personal space with a familiarity she hadn't shown in years. "If you own the venue, then we don't have to deal with that corporate management company anymore. We can deal directly with you. We can fix the deposit issue internally." She looked at Evan, nodding encouragingly. "Evan, tell her this is great news. It stays in the family." Evan looked up. The desperation in his eyes shifted into something that looked disturbing, like entitlement. He saw a lifeline. "Bryn is right," he said, his voice gaining strength. "Luce, look, I messed up with the loan. I admit that. Okay, I was under pressure. But now we can work this out." "Work this out," I repeated. "Yeah," Evans said. He stood up and walked toward me, putting on his big brother face. "You own the venue. That means the money for the deposit, the money from the trust. It is just going from one family pocket to another. It is a wash. We can just write it off." I stared at him. The logic was so twisted it was almost impressive. So I said slowly, You forge my signature to steal from a trust I am a beneficiary of to pay a company I own. And your solution is that I should just let you keep the money because I am the one you stole it from. It is not stealing if it stays in the family." Bryn interjected. "God, Lucy, why do you have to be so transactional? This is your brother. This is my vow renewal." She reached out and touched my arm. I pulled away as if she were burning hot. "Think about it," Bryn pressed. "You have this massive estate. You are rich apparently. What is $25,000 to you? Nothing. But to Evan it saves his career. If you report this fraud, he loses his license. He goes to jail. Do you want to be the sister who sent her brother to prison over a venue booking?" She paused, then played her ace card. "Besides," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "if you own the place, you can give us the dates for free. We can upgrade the package. We can really show the world what the Hughes family is capable of. You owe us that much, don't you?" "I owe you?" I asked. My voice was low, trembling with suppressed rage. "Yes," Evans said. He crossed his arms. "Come on, Lucy. They're real. Who looked out for you when we were kids? Who drove you to school? Who let you crash on their couch that one summer? We have always been there for you. We carried you. Now you are in a position to give back. It is your turn to step up." I looked at them. I looked at the three of them standing in my living room rewriting history in real time. They were erasing years of neglect and replacing it with a fantasy of support to justify their greed. My turn to step up, I said. I walked to the window. I looked out at the city. "Do you remember when I was 25? I asked, keeping my back to them. "And I wanted to bring a date to your wedding." Bryn sighed. "Oh, bah. Are we bringing up ancient history? You told me no." I said, "You said the guest list was tight. You said I would just embarrass myself." I turned around. "And Evan, do you remember your second wedding? The one happening right now. The one you banned me from because I didn't fit the aesthetic. That was different." Evan said, "We were under stress. You stood outside a church and had a security guard tell me I wasn't on the list." I said, "You told me I wasn't wanted. You told me I was a stain on the picture." I walked back to the center of the room. "And now," I said, my voice rising, "now that you know I own the frame, the picture goes in. Suddenly I am family. Suddenly I am essential. I am not asking to be in the wedding." Bryn snapped. "I am asking you to be a sister and let us use the venue. If you sabotage this event, Lucy, you are not just hurting us. You are humiliating the entire family. Everyone will know the scandal will destroy us." She pointed a manicured finger at me. "If you cancel this booking, you are the one tearing this family apart. You are the villain." I looked at her finger. I wanted to break it, but I didn't. "The person humiliating this family," I said, my voice cold and hard as steel, "is the man who had to forge his little sister's signature because he is too incompetent to earn his own money." Evan lunged forward. "You stop." The shout came from the window. We all turned. My father had turned around. His face was gray. He looked like he had aged 10 years and 10 minutes. He walked over to the coffee table. He looked down at the documents I had thrown there. He picked up the copy of Nana Rose's will. He didn't read it. He didn't have to. I knew, he whispered. The room went silent. "What did you say, Dad?" Evan asked. I knew, my father repeated. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. "I knew Nana left you the right of first refusal." He said, "The lawyer told me before the reading. He told me she wanted you to have the house. She said you were the only one who respected the history." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Imnir?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. My mother looked at him. "Richard, you knew. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it would have caused a war," my father shouted. He looked at Evan and Bryn. "Look at you too. If I had told you Nana chose Lucy over you, you would have torn her apart. You would have fought the will. You would have dragged us through court for years." He looked back at me. "I thought if I just stayed quiet, you would let the auction expire," he said. "I thought the house was too much work. I thought you would walk away and we could just sell it and split the money and everyone would be happy." He slumped his shoulders. "I was trying to keep the peace. Lucy, I was trying to protect them from their own jealousy and I was trying to protect you from their anger." I stared at him. "You weren't protecting me. I said, my voice broke. You watched them treat me like I was stupid for 4 years. You watched them mock me. You watched Evan lecture me about money. And you knew the whole time that I was the one none chose. You let them believe I was nothing so they wouldn't feel threatened. I wiped a single tear from my cheek. I refused to let any more fall. You sacrificed my dignity to feed their egos. I said. My father didn't answer. He couldn't. Bryn broke the silence. She didn't care about the revelation. She cared about the timeline. Okay, fine, she said, waving her hand. Dad knew. Whatever. That doesn't change where we are right now. She looked at me with renewed intensity. The invitations are out, Lucy. People are booking flights. If we change the venue now, we look like idiots. We look broke. She stepped closer. You have made your point. You are rich. You are smart. You won. Congratulations. Now be a big girl and sign the contract. Let us have the wedding and Evan will pay you back the 25,000 overtime. She smiled, a cold shark-like smile. Unless you want Mom to have a heart attack from the stress, because that is on you. I looked at my mother. She was clutching her chest right on cue, looking at me with pleading eyes. Please, Lucy, my mother whispered. Just fix this for us. I looked at the four of them. My mother, the enabler, my father, the coward, Evan, the thief, Bryn, the parasite. They were a closed loop of toxicity, and they were trying to pull me back in. They were using the very abuse they had inflicted on me as the reason I should save them. We broke you, so you must understand how much we need to be fixed. I walked to the door. I opened it wide. Get out, I said. Bryn's jaw dropped. Excuse me, I said. Get out of my apartment, I repeated. We are not leaving until we have a deal, Evan shouted. There is no deal, I said. I looked at Evan. You want a deal. Here is the deal. You have 24 hours to vacate the booking at Mariner's Gate. You will send an email to the guests saying the venue had to be changed due to unforeseen circumstances. You will take the hit, and if we don't, Bryn challenged. You won't do anything. We're too afraid of looking bad. I smiled. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that reputation is a shackle, and I had just found the key. Try me, I said. I looked at my father. Take your children home. Dad, I said before I call security. And trust me, the security in this building actually checks the list. My father looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. He took my mother's arm. Come on, Bella. He said, let's go. He walked past me. He didn't look me in the eye. Evan and Bryn stood there for a second, furious, impotent. You are making a huge mistake, Evan hissed as he walked out. You are going to regret this. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. Regret? No. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel regret. I felt the terrifying, exhilarating clarity of someone who has just burned the bridge while she was still standing on it and realized she could fly. I walked back to the table. I picked up my phone. I dialed David, my lawyer. David, I said, I am here. Lucy, draft the eviction notice, I said. And David, yes, prepare the file for the district attorney. You are going to press charges, David asked. I looked at the empty spot where my family had stood. I am giving them one chance to surrender, I said. If they don't take it, I am releasing the hounds. The morning after the confrontation in my apartment, I did not wake up with a hangover of guilt. I woke up with the clarity of a surgeon scrubbing in for an amputation. The limb was gangrenous. I had tried to treat it with antibiotics for years, but now the only option left was to cut. I sat in my office at Northgate Meridian Partners. David, my attorney, sat across from me. Between us lay a document that represented the last lifeline I was willing to throw to my family. It is a standard settlement offer and conditional release, David said, sliding the paper toward me. I read it. It was brutal in its simplicity. 1. Evan Hughes admits to the unauthorized use of Lucy Hughes's personal identity to secure a line of credit in the amount of $25,000. 2. Evan Hughes agrees to assume full liability for said debt immediately. 3. Evan Hughes and Bryn Weller admit to the fraudulent use of family funds to secure a venue booking at Mariner's Gate Estate. 4. The The booking is canceled by mutual agreement. 5. A public apology is issued to the extended family clarifying that the venue change is due to a misunderstanding of availability and not any fault of the owner. If they sign this, David said, we seal the evidence. The credit fraud report goes into a vault. The venue fraud is buried. They lose the venue and Evan takes the financial hit, but they keep their freedom. They stay out of jail. And if they don't, I asked. David leaned back. Then we file the police report for identity theft. We file the civil suit for fraud. And we released the statement to the press explaining exactly why the event of the season was shut down. I picked up a pen. I signed the offer. Send it. I said, give them 48 hours. David nodded. He scanned the document and hit send. The clock started ticking. I'd expected silence. I expected them to huddle together, realize they had been cornered, and frantically signed the document to save their skins. I expected self-preservation to kick in, but I had underestimated their capacity for delusion. The first sign that they were not going to take the exit ramp came at noon. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Sarah, the one who had ignored me at the gate of Evan's first wedding. I just heard what you're doing. I can't believe you would be this petty. I frowned. I typed back. Excuse me, Bryn told us. Sarah replied. She said you are holding the venue hostage because you are jealous. She didn't ask you to be a bridesmaid. She said you are demanding money to let them in. That is extortion. Lucy, I thought you were better than that. I stared at the screen. Bryn, she wasn't reading the legal document. She was spinning a narrative. She knew she couldn't win in a court of law. So she was taking the case to the court of public opinion, the family gossip mill. She was painting me as the vindictive, money-hungry sister who was ruining her happiness out of spite. She was betting that if she created enough social pressure, I would buckle. She was wrong. I didn't reply to Sarah. I didn't defend myself. In my line of work, you don't argue with rumors, you document them. I took a screenshot of the text and dragged it into the evidence folder. Strike one, I whispered. At 2:00 in the afternoon, my office phone rang. It was Jessica, the venue manager at Mariner's Gate. MS. Used, she asked. Her voice sounded tight. Yes, Jessica. What is it? I just got off the phone with a Mr. Evan Hughes, she said. He was very aggressive. I felt a cold spike of anger. Did you record the call? I asked. Yes, ma'am. She said, as per your instructions. All calls regarding this booking are automatically recorded. Send it to me. I said a minute later. The audio file appeared in my inbox. I put on my headphones. I pressed play. Jessica Mariner's Gate Estate. Jessica speaking. Evan, listen to me. This is Evan Hughes. I am the client for the October 15th event. Jessica. Yes, Mr. Hughes. I have your file here. Evan, I don't care about your file. I need you to listen. I know my sister, Lucy Hughes, thinks she runs the show there, but she is having a mental health crisis. Jessica. Sir Evan. No. Listen. She is unstable. She is off her meds. She is trying to sabotage my event because she is confused. I need you to ignore any emails or directives coming from her. I am the one with the checkbook. I am the one paying the bills. Jessica. Sir M.S. Hughes is the owner of the property. Evan, she is a figurehead. My parents put the property in her name for tax purposes. She doesn't actually make the decisions. Look, I am authorized to offer you a bonus, a personal bonus. $5,000 cash just for you. If you keep the booking active and lock her out of the system for the next week, just until after the event, we just need to get through the weekend without her crazy interference. The recording ended. I sat there, the silence of the office pressing against my ears. He had not just lied. He had tried to bribe my employee. He had tried to gaslight my staff into believing I was mentally incompetent. And he had claimed once again that my success was actually just a handout from our parents. The same parents who didn't even know I owned the place until last night. It was pathological. He was incapable of seeing me as an autonomous human being. To him, I was either a prop or an obstacle. I called Jessica back. Jessica, I said, you did excellent work. He offered me $5,000. Jessica said, sounding disgusted. Does he think I can be bought for $5,000? He thinks everyone has a price, I said. Because he does. I saved the recording. Strike two. By evening, the family group chat, which I'd been muted in for years but never removed from, was a war zone. My Aunt Linder posted, "Families forgive. That is what we do. Shame on anyone who uses money as a weapon." My cousin Mike posted, "Wait, is it true? Evan stole her identity. I heard something about a loan." Bryn replied instantly, "That is a lie. Lucy made up. She is trying to blackmail us. Please, everyone, just pray for her. She is really lost right now." I watched the messages scroll by. It was fascinating in a morbid way. They were dividing themselves into camps. The blind loyalists who believe the Lucy is crazy story because it was comfortable, and the skeptics, the ones who had noticed the cracks in Evan's golden facade over the years, who were starting to ask questions. I didn't intervene. I let them fight. Every lie Bin posted was another nail in her coffin. Every denial Evan made was another charge on the indictment. I went home early. My apartment felt quiet, but it was a clean quiet. It was the quiet of a fortress. I walked into my study. On the top shelf of the bookcase, there was a wooden box. It was old, smelling of cedar and lavender. It was the box Nonna Rose had given me the week before she died. I hadn't opened it in 3 years. I hadn't needed to. I knew what was inside. Photographs, recipes, letters from her youth. But there was something else. A memory tugged at me. Something she had said to me when she handed me the box. "Keep the receipts, Lucy. In this family, history has a way of being rewritten by the loudest voice. You keep the truth." I took the box down. I opened it. I sifted through the papers until I found a thick cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax on the front in her shaky, elegant script. It read, "To be read when the wolves are at the door." My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. I pulled out a single sheet of parchment. It wasn't a legal will. It was a moral testament. "My dearest Lucy, if you are reading this, it means they have come for you. I always knew they would. Your mother loves comfort more than truth. Your brother loves the appearance of success more than the work of it. And your sister loves the reflection in the mirror more than the person standing next to her. I am leaving you the house not just because you love it, but because you are the only one strong enough to hold the gate. The Mariner's Gate was built by my father to weather hurricanes. It stands because its foundation is stone, not sand. Know this. The wealth of this family was built on hard work and honest dealings. I have seen the way Evan cuts corners. I have seen the way Bryn covets. I fear for what they will become. So I leave you this instruction, not as a grandmother, but as the matriarch. The assets I leave behind are for those who build, not those who take. Anyone who uses the family name or the family coin for deceit forfeits their seat at the table. Do not let them bully you with the word family. Blood is biology. Loyalty is a choice. Stand your ground. Little bird, you are the stone. Love, Narner. I read the letter 3 times. Anyone who uses the family name or the family coin for deceit forfeits their seat at the table. Tears pricked my eyes hot and fast. She had known. She had seen it coming decades ago. She had seen the rot in Evan and Bryn even when they were children, and she had armed me against it. She hadn't just given me a house. She had given me a mandate. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Evan. "Come on, Luce. Don't be a monster. Just sign the release and let us have the venue. We can talk about the money later. Don't ruin Bryn's big day. Mom is crying nonstop." I looked at the text. Then I looked at Nanner's letter. Do not let them bully you with the word family. I realized then that this wasn't just a dispute about a venue or a loan. It was a test. For years, I had thought the test was whether I could be good enough for them, whether I could be successful enough, fit enough, impressive enough to earn their love. But I had it backwards. This was their test. I had given them a chance. I had offered them a way out. I had said, "Admit your mistake. Pay what you owe, and we can handle this quietly." I had given them a chance to show integrity, and instead they chose to slander me. They chose to bribe my staff. They chose to gaslight the family. They chose to double down on the lie. They had failed the test. I walked over to my desk. I picked up the settlement offer David had drafted. I looked at the deadline. They still had 24 hours left, but I knew they wouldn't sign it. They were too arrogant to believe I would actually pull the trigger. They thought I was bluffing. They thought I was still the little girl who craved their approval so badly I would eat the scraps from their table and say thank you. They didn't know that the little girl was gone. I took a photo of Nonner's letter. I cropped it so only the line about deceit and forfeiting the seat at the table was visible. I sent it to the family group chat. No caption, no explanation, just the image of our grandmother's handwriting delivering a verdict from the grave. The chat went silent. Then I sent a text to David. Prepare the final eviction notice, and David, call the bank. Tell them I am ready to file the official police report for identity theft. Are you sure? David texted back, once we ring this bell. You can't unring it. I looked at the box of letters. I looked at the black dress I had worn to dinner. I am not ringing the bell. I typed, I am sounding the alarm. I put the phone down. I felt a deep, profound sense of peace. The bridge wasn't just burning. It was already ash, and the only way forward was through the fire. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. I stood by the window and toasted the city. To the stone I whispered, tomorrow the deadline would expire. Tomorrow the week of the wedding would officially begin. And tomorrow I was going to show them exactly what happens when you try to build a stage on property you don't own. They wanted a show. I was going to give them a finale. The week leading up to October 15th was a master class in cognitive dissonance. If you looked at Instagram, the Hughes Wellervow renewal was a fairy tale in motion. Bryn was posting 3 times a day. She posted photos of the dress fittings. She posted throwback photos of her first wedding with captions about enduring love and new chapters. She posted a countdown clock that ticked away the seconds until the garler at the gate. She even posted a sneak peek of the venue. It was a photo of the main gate at Mariner's Gate Estate, the iron wrought in the shape of serpents. Her caption read, so blessed to have secured this exclusive location. Sometimes the stars just align. I stared at the photo on my phone. The stars hadn't aligned. Her brother had committed a felony. They were building a stage on a sinkhole, and they were dancing on top of it, convinced that if they just danced fast enough, the ground wouldn't swallow them whole. They were betting everything, their money, their reputation, their social standing, on the idea that I was bluffing. They were betting that the little sister who used to cry when they teased her about her braces wouldn't have the stomach to pull the trigger. But they weren't dealing with the little sister anymore. They were dealing with the landlord. My phone became a grenade that went off every hour. The notifications were a relentless barrage of manipulation. Evan, you are taking this too far. Lucy, I talked to Mom. She is a wreck. Do you want to be responsible for putting her in the hospital? Bryn, my friends are flying in from London tomorrow. Do not embarrass me. I swear to God. Lucy, if you ruin this, I will make sure you never see your nieces again. Aunt Linder, I heard there is a squabble over the venue. Be the bigger person. Honey, family is all we have. I didn't block them. I needed the record. I let the texts pile up. A digital mountain of evidence proving that they knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't confused. They weren't apologetic. They were entitled. On Wednesday, 3 days before the event, the tone shifted. The anger turned into desperation. My mother called. I was in a meeting with my risk assessment team, analyzing a volatile tech merger. I saw her name on the screen. I stepped out into the hallway, the glass walls of the conference room muffling the sound of the busy office behind me. "Hello, Mother," I said. "Lucy," she said. Her voice was thin, trembling. It was the voice she used when she wanted to guilt-trip my father into buying her jewelry. "I am listening." I said, "You have to stop this," she said. "Please, I am begging you." "Stop what?" I asked. "Stop protecting my property. Stop reporting a crime. Stop making a scene," she hissed. The trembling vanished, replaced by the sharp edge of panic. "Do you have any idea who is coming to this renewal? The mayor might drop by. Evan's boss is coming. If you cancel the venue now, if you lock them out, we will be the laughingstock of the entire town." I leaned against the cold glass wall. "So that is it," I said. "It is not about right or wrong. It is about the neighbors. It is about our name," she cried. "The Hugh name means something. Lucy, we have spent 40 years building a reputation in this community. You can't flush it down the toilet because of a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated. Evans stole $25,000 from me. He forged my signature. He is currently trying to bribe my employees. He will pay you back, she shouted. We will all pay you back. I will sell my car. I will take a loan. Just don't say anything. Let the party happen. Smile. Pretend it is fine for me, Lucy. Just swallow it one last time. I closed my eyes. Just swallow it one last time. That was the family motto. Swallow the hurt. Swallow the truth. Swallow your dignity so we can look pretty for the pictures. I realized then that my mother didn't love me less than she loved Evan and Bryn. It was worse than that. She loved her reflection more than she loved any of us. And Evan and Bryn polished that reflection while I cracked it. No, mother. I said what I said. No, I said firmly. I am done swallowing. And if the Hughes name is so fragile that the truth can destroy it, then maybe it deserves to be destroyed. I hung up. I walked back into the conference room. My hands were steady. My heart was slow. I felt lighter. The last tether that bound me to their approval had just snapped. Thursday morning, 48 hours to 0 hour. I sat in David's office. The desk was covered in paper. We had the affidavit from the bank confirming the fraudulent signature. We had the IP logs tracing the loan application to Evan's house. We had the recording of Evan trying to bribe Jessica. We had the copy of the trust fund withdrawal. It was a killet. It was a dossier that could send my brother to prison for 5 years. But I had one more move to make. I wasn't a monster. I was a professional, and professionals always offer a settlement before they go to trial. David looked at me. Are you sure you want to give them this out? He asked after everything they have said. Yes. I said, I want to be able to sleep at night knowing I gave them a chance to do the right thing even if I know they won't take it. We drafted the final email. It was addressed to Evan and Bryn with a copy to our parents. Subject final notice of cancellation and settlement offer to Evan and Bryn. This is the final communication regarding the unauthorized booking at Mariners Gate Estate for October 15th. You have exactly 24 hours from the receipt of this email to voluntarily cancel the event. If you issue a public statement by noon tomorrow citing unforeseen maintenance issues and move the event to another location or cancel it entirely, I will agree to keep the details of the financial fraud private. I will work with Evan on a repayment plan for the $25,000 and no criminal charges will be filed. However, if you attempt to proceed with the event or if you attempt to access the property after noon tomorrow, I will enforce my rights as the owner. The police will be called for trespassing. The fraud evidence will be turned over to the district attorney and the true reason for the cancellation will be made public. The choice is yours. You can lose the party or you can lose everything. Lucy, I hit send. I watched the email vanish from the outbox. Now we wait, I said. The response came 4 hours later. It didn't come via email. It came via a text from Bryn. You are bluffing. You wouldn't dare do this to us. Mom is already at the salon getting her hair done. The caterers are prepping. You are just trying to scare us because you are miserable. We are showing up on Saturday. If the gates are locked, we are breaking them down. I showed the text to David. Breaking them down. He read. Well, that is premeditated intent to trespass and destroy property. Add it to the file. I said I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 5:00 in the afternoon on Thursday. The deadline was noon on Friday. I went home. I didn't sleep well that night, but not because I was afraid. I felt the buzzing energy of a runner waiting for the starting gun. I checked my security system at the estate remotely. The cameras were active. The smart locks were engaged. The perimeter sensors were green. Friday morning broke with a gray, heavy sky. It looked like rain at 11:55 in the morning. I sat at my desk watching the minutes tick by. 11:56, 11:57. My phone remained silent. No email came through, no apology, no cancellation notice. They were calling my bluff. They genuinely believed that the pressure of family was stronger than the pressure of the law. They believed that when push came to shove, I would fold because I always folded. 12:00, the deadline passed. I picked up my phone. I called the head of security for Prestige Heritage Group. a former military contractor named Marcus. "Marcus," I said, "we are ready." "MS." "Hughes," he replied. His voice was deep and reassuring. "Initiate the protocol," I said. "No one gets in. I don't care if they are wearing a wedding dress. I don't care if they scream. If they step 1 foot past the gate, you hold the line." "Understood," Marcus said. "And the police have the non-emergency number dialed and ready." I said, "But don't call them yet. I want to be there when the hammer drops." I hung up. I stood up and walked to the window of my office. I looked down at the city. They had chosen. They had chosen the hard way. I went to the closet in my office and pulled out a garment bag. Inside was the black dress I had bought, not the one from the dinner, but a new one. This one was sharper, tailored. It was a dress that said authority. I wasn't going to the wedding as a guest. I wasn't going as a sister. I was going as the consequences of their actions. The next 24 hours were a blur of logistics. I met with David. We finalized the paperwork. We had a stack of documents ready to be served. The cease and desist, the trespass notice, the copy of the fraud affidavit. Saturday morning arrived, the day of the vow renewal. The weather had cleared. It was a beautiful, crisp autumn day, the kind of day brides pray for. The sky was a piercing blue. The leaves were turning gold. I checked Instagram. Bryn had posted a photo of her morning coffee. "Today is the day. Marrying my best friend all over again. Love wins Mariners' Gate." I felt a strange detachment. It was like watching someone walk off a cliff while smiling at the camera. I got dressed. I put on the black dress. I've put on my heels. I put on my sunglasses. I drove to the office first. David met me there. He was wearing his courtroom suit. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. We got into his car. We drove out of the city, heading toward the coast, toward Harbor Cove, toward Mariners' Gate. The drive took 2 hours. As we got closer, I started to see the signs. Little white arrows staked into the grass on the side of the road. Hughes Weller wedding. They led the way like breadcrumbs into the oven. We turned onto the private road that led to the estate. The trees formed a tunnel overhead. At the end of the tunnel, I could see the iron gates, my gates. There were cars already lining up, high-end SUVs, luxury sedans. Guests were arriving, but the gates were closed. I saw a commotion at the front. A white limousine was idling there. A group of people were standing outside it, gesturing wildly at the stone pillars. I recognized the back of Bryn's head. I recognized the frantic waving of Evan's arms. David slowed the car. "Here we go," he said. I looked at the scene. My family, dressed in their finest, screaming at a locked gate. They looked small from here. They looked like children who had been locked out of the playground. But this wasn't a playground. It was my life, and they had trespassed on it for the last time. I opened the car door. I stepped out onto the gravel. The sound of my heels was lost in the shouting coming from the gate. I adjusted my sunglasses. I checked my watch. It was time. I walked toward them. I didn't run. I walked with the steady, inevitable pace of a glacier. Evan saw me first. He stopped shouting at the intercom. He turned. His face went from red to white in a split second. "Lucy," he breathed. Bryn spun around. She was wearing a white lace gown that probably cost $10,000. Her face was twisted in a mask of fury. "You," she screamed. "Open this gate. Open it right now." I stopped 10 ft away from them. I crossed my arms. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. "This is insane," Bryn yelled. "The guests are watching. You are humiliating us." I looked past her at the line of cars. Faces were pressed against the windows. Phones were out. They were recording. I said, "Let them watch." I looked at Evan. "I gave you a choice, Evan. I gave you 24 hours. I gave you a graceful exit." He took a step toward me. "Lucy, please just open the gate. We can fix this later. Just let us in." I shook my head. "The time for fixing it was yesterday," I said. "Today is for paying the bill." I signaled to David. He stepped forward, the file in his hand. "Evan Hughes," David said, his voice projecting clearly. "Van Weller, you are hereby served with a notice of criminal trespass. You have been denied entry to the premises." of Mariners Gate Estate by the owner, LH Coastal Holdings. He handed the papers to Evan, who took them automatically, his hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. Furthermore, David continued, we are informing you that the deposit for this event was flagged as fraudulent and rejected by the bank this morning. There is no valid booking. This event does not exist. Bryn let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. You can't do this, she shrieked. It is my day. I stepped closer to her. I took off my sunglasses so she could look me in the eye. It is not your day, Bryn, I said softly. It is my property. I pointed to the gate, and you are not on the list. The silence that followed was total. Even the bird seemed to stop singing, and then, from the back of the limousine, the door opened. My father stepped out. He walked toward us. He looked at the closed gate. He looked at the legal papers in Evan's hand. He looked at me. I braced myself. I expected him to yell. I expected him to plead, but he didn't. He looked at his son and daughter, who were currently imploding in front of 100 witnesses. Then he looked at me, and for the first time in 30 years, he didn't look through me. He looked at me. Go home, Evan, my father said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Dad, Evan cried. Make her open it, I said. Go home, my father repeated. It is over. He turned to me. He didn't smile, but he nodded, a single sharp nod of acknowledgement. He knew. He finally accepted that the power had shifted. The king was dead. The queen was dead. And the exile had returned to take the castle. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the keypad on the stone pillar. I punched in my code. The small pedestrian gate clicked open. I stepped inside. I turned back to face them one last time. I stood on my land. They stood on the public road. The line was drawn. I am sorry it had to be this way, I said, but you taught me well. I closed the gate. The lock engaged with a heavy final thud. I didn't watch them leave. I walked up the driveway under the canopy of oaks toward the house that I had built, the house that was finally truly mine. Behind me, the sound of Bryn's weeping was drowned out by the sound of engines starting. As the audience realized the show was over and the curtain had come down on the Hughes family fantasy, the orchestra was playing the Vivaldi. It was a rich, swelling sound that drifted over the manicured lawn of Mariners Gate Estate, perfectly synchronized with the gentle lapping of the tide against the sea wall. The scene was aggressively perfect. It was the kind of perfection that costs tens of thousands of dollars and requires a small army of florists to execute. White hydrangeas spilled out of gold urns. Silk ribbons fluttered in the breeze. The guests, a hand-picked selection of the city's social elite, sat in rows of white Chiavari chairs, their faces turned toward the flower arch where my brother and sister stood. Bryn looked like a queen. She was wearing a gown that was far too white and far too expensive for a vow renewal, holding a bouquet of imported peonies. She was glowing, basking in the attention, convinced that she had pulled off the heist of the century beside her. Evan stood with his chest puffed out, shaking hands with the mayor in the front row, looking for all the world like a politician on the campaign trail. They thought I had disappeared. They thought that my silence over the last 12 hours was submission. They believed that in the end I had done what I always did, retreated into the shadows to let them shine. They were wrong. I hadn't retreated. I had just been waiting for the curtain to rise. The master of ceremonies, a man with a baritone voice hired from the local theater troupe, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we are gathered here today to celebrate enduring love, family legacy, and the renewal of promises. That was my cue. I didn't sneak in. I didn't slip through a side door. I walked straight down the center aisle. I was flanked on my left by David, my attorney, whose briefcase was thick with the evidence of their crimes. On my right was Marcus, the head of security for the estate, wearing a uniform that made it very clear he wasn't here to pass out orders. The sound of our footsteps on the stone path cut through the music. Heads began to turn. A murmur rippled through the crowd, starting from the back and rolling forward like a wave. The MC faltered. He looked at me, then at Evan, confused. "Excuse me," I said. My voice wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be in the acoustics of the garden I had designed. It carried perfectly. "Cut the music," I ordered. The string quartet stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the wind and the sudden sharp intake of breath from 300 guests. Evan spun around. His political smile dropped, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. Bryn looked like she had been slapped. "Lucid," Evan hissed. "What are you doing? Get out of here." I walked until I was standing at the foot of the altar steps. I looked up at them. I felt 10 ft tall. "This event is over," I said. Bryn took a step forward, her face twisting. "You can't do this. You are ruining everything. Get security." "I am security," Marcus said, stepping forward. His voice was deep and calm. "And this lady is the owner." The crowd gasped. I saw the mayor lean forward, his eyes narrowing. "This is private property," I announced, turning to address the guests. "The booking for this event was made fraudulently. The contracts are invalid. The deposit was paid with stolen funds." Liar, Bryn shrieked. She sounded unhinged. "She is lying. She is just jealous. She is trying to kill this family." I looked at David. He didn't need a prompt. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the file. He didn't speak to Bryn. He spoke to the crowd. "We have documentation proving that Mr. Evan Hughes forged the signature of the owner, Ms. Lucy Hughes, on the rental agreement." David stated clearly, "We also have forensic evidence from Citibank confirming that Mr. Hughes committed identity theft to access the funds used for the deposit. This event is being funded by the proceeds of a felony." The word felony hung in the air. The guests were no longer looking at Bryn's dress. They were looking at Evan. They were looking at the man who had shaken their hands and charmed their wives. And they were seeing the fraud beneath the suit. Evan scrambled down the steps. He rushed toward me, grabbing my arm. His grip was desperate. "Lucy, please," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Let's go somewhere private. We can talk about this. I will give you anything. I will sign anything. Just don't do this here. Not in front of them." I pulled my arm away. I looked at him with a cold detachment. "You wanted to talk, Evan?" I asked. "I tried to talk to you all week. I sent you an offer. I gave you a chance to cancel this quietly. I gave you a graceful exit. I tore it up." He hissed. "I thought you were bluffing." I smoothed the fabric of my dress. "I never bluff," I said. Bryn was sobbing now, a loud, ugly sound that had none of the cinematic grace she had practiced. "You are a monster," she screamed at me. "How could you do this to us? We are your blood." I looked past her. I looked at the sea of faces. I saw my cousins. I saw the neighbors. I saw the people who had judged me for years based on the stories my siblings told. And then I saw my father. He was sitting in the front row next to my mother, who was currently weeping into a handkerchief. He stood up. He looked old. He looked tired. He walked up the steps to the altar. He stood between Bryn and the microphone. "Dad, stop her," Bryn pleaded. "Tell everyone she is crazy." My father looked at the crowd. Then he looked at his children. "Stop it," he said. His voice was low, but the microphone picked it up. "Dad," Evan asked. "Stop lying," my father said. The silence was absolute. "We have gone too far," my father said. He looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, only a profound sadness. "She owns the house," he said to the guests. "My daughter Lucy owns this estate. She bought it herself, and my son used her money without her permission to bring us here." He took a deep breath. "There is no wedding," he said. "Please go home." Evan looked as if he had been shot. Bryn collapsed onto the steps, her dress pulling around her like a deflated parachute. The illusion was shattered. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a public exposure. The guests began to stand up. There was no polite chatter. There was only the scraping of chairs and the hurried sound of people trying to distance themselves from the contamination of a scandal. Evan looked at me. His eyes were wet. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you have to burn it all down? You could have just said no." I looked at him. I thought about the church gate. I thought about the security guard. I thought about the years of being told I wasn't enough. I stepped closer to him so only he could hear me. "You banned me from your weddings because I didn't fit the image." I said, "You told me I was an embarrassment. You told me to stay away to save your reputation." I gestured to the empty aisle. "I am just doing what you taught me. Evan, I am removing the embarrassment from my property." I turned to Marcus. "Clear the grounds," I said. You have 30 minutes. After that, call the police for trespassing. I didn't wait for them to leave. I turned and walked back down the aisle. I walked past the shocked faces of the people who had looked down on me for years. I didn't look at the ground. I looked straight ahead. I didn't go to the press. I didn't sell the story to the tabloids. I didn't need to. The truth spreads faster than any headline. By the next morning, everyone knew Evan lost his job. Bryn lost her social circle. The garler at the gate became a cautionary tale in our town. They tried to reach out. Of course, weeks later, when the dust settled, the text started coming again. Let's start over. We miss you. I never replied. I stood on the balcony of Mariner's Gate a month later. The hydrangeas were gone, replaced by the sturdy, weathering greens of autumn. The house was quiet. It was mine. I thought about the last thing I said to them before I walked away that day. I had turned back, looked at Evan and Bryn, shivering in the ruins of their ego, and delivered the only eulogy their relationship with me deserved. You guys used to tell me I wasn't qualified to be in the room for your big days. I had said, so today I am saying no. No participation, no funding, no covering up, no playing the lesser role anymore. I took a sip of my coffee and watched the tide roll in. The stage had collapsed, but for the first time, the view was perfect. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So, please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on Lucy's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Thanks to all.